the United States spend millions of dollars per day moving what is essentially a floating city halfway around the world? In an era where stealth bombers can strike any target on Earth within hours, why does the Pentagon still rely on massive aircraft carriers that move slower than most commercial ships? At first glance, it looks outdated, almost irrational. But this is not a mistake, and it is not inertia. It is a deliberate choice, one that reveals how American power actually works. Moving a U.S. nuclear-powered supercarrier from the South China Sea to the Persian Gulf is not a simple redeployment. It is one of the most complex military operations, short of war. A single carrier strike group burns through between $6 and $9 million every day. That cost includes aviation, fuel, maintenance, logistics, food, spare parts, escort operations, and the coordination of thousands of personnel across sea, air, and space. And yet, the United States continues to do this because no other military asset on Earth can replace what a carrier strike group provides: sustained, visible, and flexible power. A bomber strikes and leaves. A carrier stays. That distinction matters more than ever. A carrier strike group does not just attack targets. It changes behavior. It places 70 or more combat aircraft just offshore and keeps them there. It signals commitment. It enforces air dominance over a region for weeks or months at a time. This kind of persistent presence is something bombers, no matter how advanced, simply cannot maintain on their own. This is why, when tensions rise in critical regions like the Middle East, the United States does not rely on air power alone. It moves carriers. What we are witnessing now is one of the largest naval redistributions since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The chessboard is shifting. The Pentagon is reallocating forces from the Indo-Pacific to the Persian Gulf, not because Asia no longer matters, but because American strategy is global and flexible. The ability to move decisive force from one theater to another is itself a form of deterrence. On paper, the United States operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. These are divided into two classes. First, the Nimitz-class carriers, 10 ships commissioned between 1975 and 2009. These vessels form the backbone of American naval aviation. Second, the Ford-class carrier. Currently, only one is operational, the USS Gerald R. Ford. This new generation represents a significant leap forward, using electromagnetic aircraft launch systems that increase sortie rates while reducing wear on aircraft and crew. These ships are not always at sea. Some are in maintenance, others are training, a few are forward deployed. At any given moment, only a portion of the fleet is immediately available. That is why redeployment decisions are so significant. Consider a real-world scenario. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is typically stationed in the Pacific, where it plays a central role in deterring Chinese naval activity. If Washington issues flash priority orders, that same carrier can sprint toward the Middle East in roughly a week. To do so, it must transit one of the most strategically sensitive choke points on Earth, the Strait of Malacca, between Malaysia and Indonesia. This narrow corridor handles a massive percentage of global trade and energy shipments, and it is closely monitored by multiple nations. At the same time, another carrier can be activated from the Atlantic. The USS George H.W. Bush, based in Norfolk, Virginia, can cross the Atlantic, enter the Mediterranean, and move toward the eastern Middle East. Within 10 days, the United States can position 2 full carrier strike groups off the Iranian coast, forming a pincer of naval air power that few countries on Earth could even attempt. This redistribution does not mean the Pacific is abandoned. Even when carriers move, the United States retains submarines, land-based aircraft, missile forces, and allied capabilities across Japan, Guam, South Korea, and Australia. American deterrence is layered. Carriers are the visible tip of a much larger system. Naval power, however, is only part of the equation. Behind every carrier movement is an immense logistical operation, particularly when it comes to missile defense. In recent months, the United States quietly shifted a large portion of its missile defense assets. Approximately 60% of certain Patriot systems were redeployed from bases like Qatar as part of a broader force realignment. This raised an immediate question: how does the U.S. rapidly rebuild missile defenses in a high-threat environment? The answer is airlift on a scale few nations can comprehend. The U.S. Air Force operates the C-17 Globemaster III, one of the most capable heavy transport aircraft ever built. To move 4 to 6 Patriot batteries and the components of a DoD system requires over 300 heavy transport flights. These aircraft operate continuously, delivering radar units, launchers, command vehicles, and interceptors from stockpiles around the world. One detail often overlooked is the type of missiles being moved. Not all interceptors are equal. The United States maintains older Patriot missiles alongside newer PAC-3 interceptors. The older missiles, while less advanced, are perfectly suited for countering low-cost threats such as mass-produced drones. Iran operates thousands of Shade-type drones, and using the most expensive interceptors against them would be strategically wasteful. Instead, Commanders conserve their most advanced interceptors for ballistic and hypersonic threats, while drawing from Cold Warrior inventories to counter drones and cruise missiles. This is not desperation, it is efficiency. It reflects decades of planning for exactly this kind of layered defense. All of this movement comes at a cost. War is expensive, but moving an army is even more so. Operating a single carrier strike group costs between $6 and $9 million per day. That figure includes the carrier itself, its escorting destroyers and cruisers, the air wing, and the support vessels that keep everything moving. While nuclear carriers do not require conventional fuel for propulsion, their escorts do, and the logistical footprint remains enormous. A single Patriot interceptor can cost over $12 million. An SM-3 missile fired from a destroyer costs roughly $28 million per shot. When you combine naval operations, airlift fuel, missile stockpiles, and pre-positioned equipment, a 30-day deterrence operation can exceed $1.5 billion before a single strike occurs. This is the true cost of global leadership. The United States pays not only to fight wars, but to prevent them. Sustaining this force introduces another challenge: access. American power depends on global partnerships. Bases in Qatar, the UAE, and elsewhere provide critical support, but in a high-tension scenario, host nations may limit access to avoid retaliation. This is not betrayal, it is geopolitics. If access is denied, the U.S. Navy must operate under worst-case assumptions. Carrier strike groups rely on a chain of supply ships, including oilers, that stretch thousands of miles back to hubs like Diego Garcia or Guam. Maintaining this steel chain requires constant protection and coordination. The U.S. Navy trains for this scenario extensively, because modern warfare assumes contested logistics. If that chain were disrupted for an extended period, even the most powerful fleet in history would face operational constraints. This reality does not weaken American power. Explains why logistics are treated as a strategic weapon. But what if carriers cannot arrive in time? Can the United States fight without its Navy? The answer is yes. Focusing solely on naval power misses one of America's greatest strengths: global air power. The United States Air Force operates under Global Strike Command, which controls the nation's strategic bomber fleet. These aircraft can deploy anywhere on Earth within 24 hours. The first of these is the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. This aircraft is unique in human history. It can take off from the continental United States, fly non-stop across the globe, penetrate the most advanced air defense systems, and deliver massive bunker-busting munitions against hardened targets. With only 19 in existence, the B-2 is reserved for the most critical missions. Next is the B-1B Lancer, known as the Bone. This bomber carries the largest payload of any U.S. aircraft. It can fly at high subsonic or supersonic speeds and deliver overwhelming firepower, including cruise missiles and precision-guided munitions. The B-1 excels at rapid high-volume strikes once enemy defenses are degraded. Finally, there is the B-52 Edifortress. Despite its age, the B-52 remains one of the most lethal platforms in the U.S. arsenal. It functions as a flying missile truck, launching long-range cruise missiles from hundreds of miles away, while remaining outside enemy air defense envelopes. Together, these bombers form a layered attack strategy. Stealth bombers disable high-value air defense systems. Conventional bombers exploit the gaps. This sequence allows the U.S. to conduct sustained air operations even without carriers present. But bombers alone cannot replace carriers. Bombers are a scalpel. Carriers are a police presence. A bomber strike sends a message. A carrier strike group enforces it. A typical carrier strike group consists of 5 to 7 ships. At the center is the aircraft carrier itself, capable of hosting up to 90 aircraft in combat configuration. Surrounding it are Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, which specialize in air and missile defense. A Ticonderoga-class cruiser often serves as the command ship, coordinating air, surface, and subsurface operations. Frigates and support vessels provide additional protection, while Virginia-class nuclear submarines may operate silently ahead of the group, hunting enemy ships and submarines. This layered defense allows the carrier to operate in contested environments. The carrier air wing is equally complex. I-2 Hawkeye aircraft fly ahead of the group, using powerful radar systems to detect threats hundreds of kilometers away. Seahawk helicopters conduct anti-submarine warfare and search and rescue missions. C-2 Greyhound aircraft transport personnel and critical equipment between ship and shore. This is not just a weapons platform. It is a self-contained military ecosystem. When the United States moves a carrier strike group, it is not just preparing for war. It is shaping the strategic environment. It reassures allies. It deters adversaries. It buys time for diplomacy. And if deterrence fails, it provides commanders with options that do not require immediate escalation. This is why carriers still matter. In a world of hypersonic missiles, satellites, and cyber warfare, the most powerful weapon remains the ability to show up, stay, and adapt. No other nation can do this at the scale and speed of the United States. The cost is enormous. The logistics are complex. The risks are real, but so is the deterrence. And that is why, decades into the age of stealth bombers, the United States still moves floating cities across the world by choice.